Welcome to part 2 of my review of the book How to Build Brick Airplanes by Peter Blackert. This is where it's going to be real fun. So now we're going to look at the intermediary sized airplanes that have roughly 600 parts. So they're going to be quite realistic, especially compared to what you saw in the mini airplane section. And there are also a lot of features in these models, moving parts and interesting construction techniques. We're going to look at these 3 airplanes, and as a bonus feature I'm also going to include the B-2 bomber from mini airplanes. It is quite a lot bigger than the other mini airplanes, so I thought it's appropriate to have in this review. Taking the airplanes in chronological order, first we have the Mitsubishi A6M Zero from 1940. It is in scale 1 to 32. And it is probably my favorite of the airplanes from this section. It is a propeller-driven airplane. Of course, it is the one that you know from films like Pearl Harbor, used by the Japanese Empire, and only during World War II. This model here has, unfortunately, the propeller doesn't turn, but in the building instructions you are building the engine as a separate build, and then you can put that on a display stand for itself. So it is not super stable. It has actually caused me a lot of trouble to get it mounted inside of the airplane, so it was probably a bad idea to take it out. But here you can see the rotary engine. It shows 7 pistons here, but I can't remember, it's not a 7-piston engine in real life. And see if I can put it in again. So what I really like about this model is that it's not just a closed, it is a closed cockpit, but inside you can see details. There's a seat, a brown seat, if we can get that into frame. Maybe we can just do this. Oops. We're getting to the part that fell off just in a moment. So now, can you see here? We have brown seat, a control stick, and some instrumentation. The model is built on a Technic frame in the middle, and then with all of the details built outside of it, but not using Technic parts. That also means that you can take the wings off, so it's easy to put in a bag and then reassemble afterwards. Now, if we take a look at the moving parts first, then we can move on to what happens underneath. So here we have the on the wings we have roll control here. We have pitch can be changed, and of course the yaw is also moving, so you can put it into or set it up just like you want. And as you saw, we can also open the cockpit, even though it's not completely realistic in the way that you see in the real-life airplanes. So here, another nifty little detail is how the airplanes, or the wings, are not just thin, they are really modeled. So you can see a lot of parts have been used in order to create rounded shapes of the fuselage. And if we're moving down underneath, then take a look at this. So we have the landing gear, which is something that you can fold up like this, and if they are folded down, Then we have this little 1x2 plate here that we can turn in order to lock the landing gear in the down position so it doesn't fold up when you place the airplane on the landing wheels. So those are all nice little details, and let's take a look at the parts which are perhaps a little difficult to come by. For the rear wheel of the landing gear, we're using this new part here, but I found out you can just use a 1x1 plate instead, because this might not have found its way to all of your collections. It was here, right? And then comes this might be a little more difficult. This lift arm 5 here should really have been white, but the white lift arm 5 only comes in 2 Star Wars sets, Lego Technic Star Wars sets, so they are quite difficult to come by. I think there are 9 sellers on Bricklink who still sell them, and they are not cheap. So you can imagine if everybody who built this airplane also wanted to have the right parts in the right colors, then that part would quickly become unattainable. This little part here is not using the right part, but I don't have the right part in white. Let me just fetch it. So it should have been this, which sits which has much better grip in this, using the studs like that so it doesn't fall off the bomb underneath. Here I also have the 1x1 round plate, as I talked about, that you can use for the rear wheel. And the last quite rare part that I found in this airplane is the part that you're using for the windscreen. This part in particular. It has to be transparent, which when this book was released only came in 2 Star Wars sets. See if you can see a pattern here. The Resistant Bomber and an old Cloud Car. For 2019 though, it comes in the new Creator set, Helicopter Adventure, which is why I got that set. But if you don't have it in transparent, then I think using it in smoke is not a big problem. My final thing that I want to talk about in this review is regarding the building instructions. So this part here with all of the transparent parts being put together can be a bit difficult. So Peter he already knows that, so he's using the trick from the previous book. See here. I don't have the real book for the brick airplanes, but this is what he did back with the brick cars. You can see these parts are transparent, but they are shown in a different color in order to make it easier to see which parts they are. Because as you can see when we get here or here, it's very difficult to see what is going on in the transparent section. It's a really nice detail, making it easier to build the model. There are also a lot of parts which are built upside down, and that is sometimes an issue when you're getting to parts such as the little locks for the landing gear, these 1x2s here, because Peter has used the L-Draw library for parts, which means that when you see the part in the building instruction, it looks like this. And this is the underside of an old jumper plate. This is the underside of a 1x2 plate. There are now 3 versions of the jumper plate. The old one without a groove, the relatively new one with a groove, otherwise it's the same, and we have this new one with both a groove and the center pipe has been removed. But when you're seeing the building instructions, it is the 1x2 plate you should use, although it looks like the old jumper. And that's all I wanted to show with the Mitsubishi Zero. A really beautiful model, really difficult to take pictures of because it's all white with a black engine, so either you get details on the white parts or details on the engine in your pictures, so that is an unfortunate thing that I haven't really been able to find a solution for yet. But it is a beautiful model when standing on a shelf and just looking great. The second airplane is this Mirage 1110 from 1961. It is in scale 1:48, and I thought it was really fun to build, so I highly recommend building this airplane if you only have one to choose from this part of the book. As you can see, it is not completely assembled here, and that is because I just want to show the engine. The engine is built as a separate model, just like in the Mitsubishi. So you can build it and then display it for itself. Because once you have built the airplane, it is difficult to see it. It continues like this through this section here and to the exhaust nozzle. So let's just put this part back on. This model has features such as the opening cockpit, 2 control sticks, but no further details inside of the cockpit, so a bit less than what you saw in the Mitsubishi. The wings have, of course, some folding parts, and if you go to the winglet here on top, you can see this part can also turn, even though it's a bit difficult because of how it is mounted here in the bottom. So there are some parts that are not that easy to come by. I had to disassemble an Ninjago City in order to get all these dark green plates, slopes right here on the side. It does use a lot of dark green parts, so here it should have been a 2x4. I used a lot of 1x2s instead in order to get the dark green curves. Here I had to give up with the dark gray long slope, so I'm using this color instead. It's super noticeable, but I'll see if I can find one in dark gray. These logos here on the side are 2x2 round. This uses a fairly new part, so I only have one of these 2x2 round with one stud in the middle. If you don't have that part, then you can do like I've done on this side and use a 2x2 plate with a 1x1 plate on top of it. It looks almost the same. Then we have the parts that might be a bit difficult to come by. So we have the, not a loudspeaker, it's a megaphone parts here for the bombs on the side. It has to be white. But this part in white, we saw it last time in a Lego Scalar set from 19 years ago. So in year 2000, which means that all the ones I have in white of this are not white anymore. They are yellowed. And as you can see on the other side, it is a bit yellowed. Not as bad as the one I have on the left side, but it is still noticeable, unfortunately. The wings are mounted at an angle. Not so easy to see on top, but here underneath you can see that we have used, or Peter has used these hinges here and here to mount the wings at an angle, so they're not just mounted straight on the fuselage. That gives it this realistic shape that is really close to the real airplane. You can't take the wings off because they are locked in place using parts in the back, but that is a really, really neat detail. So not only on top do we have a lot of sections where you're moving like one plate or less than a plate in order to give it just the right curvature, but you also have the detail of the wings underneath. The landing gear is quite simple. You can turn the front wheel in like this and the rear wheels in like that. You can lock the wheels in the back in position using these 1x3 tiles. That is great if you want to display it and don't want the wheels to fold in. The bombs on the side can be dismounted, of course, if you don't want it to be displayed with bombs. Peter says it is okay to use a combination of old grey and new grey. I tend to agree with him because I don't have that many of the technical parts in new grey, but it is noticeable in the right light. So that is your decision if you want to use all new greys or a combination like I have done here. The last little thing for this model would be the display stand. So you're mounting this part here, the building instruction includes it, and that makes it easy to balance this airplane on a display stand if you like to display it like that. I prefer to just have it on its wheels like this because it looks great just like that. This is the Lockheed-Martin F-35B Lightning II. It is from 2015, so extremely recent, part of the Joint Strike Fighter project, and it is in scale 1:48. The book shows you how to build 3 versions of this airplane. My favorite version is the one I've built here. It's the one with short takeoff and vertical landing, the STOVL version. You can also get a carrier version where you're having wingtips that fold up, and the standard version where you don't have the openings on top, but instead you have a smooth bodywork instead. So this airplane here has a lot of features. Let's start from the front. The cockpit opens. Inside you'll find a control stick, but not much else for the interior. If you want to, you can use a smoke-colored cockpit instead, or cockpit window, but it looks perfectly fine and transparent. Moving on to the center, we have an opening here. Oops, up again. And it is not easy to open because this is a 1x2 plate that is supposed to lift this part, but you can see here we have the center fan because this airplane has this short takeoff and vertical landing, for which it needs a fan going through here in the middle front of the airplane. There are also other opening sections because unlike the previous two, see, this is not good to do live. I should have started with it open. You can open that part there and this part here in order to see engine details. Right here, see parts of the engine, and in the real airplane you have the engine in this section here, the jet engine. Then you have a drive shaft to the fan in the front, because then here in this section you would have the department where you're placing all of your bombs and so on. Moving on to the back, we have the exhaust nozzle, which can, of course, if you're opening this part right here, then it can be turned down. Wow. And the last little part here can be opened a bit up. So now it's in the vertical landing or short takeoff position. I don't think these parts here in the middle need to be open for that though. But you have to open for the fan. So that is the party trick of this airplane. The wings are of course also movable. You can move these parts here, although I don't think you can move them that much in the real airplane. And here you have 2 sections of movable parts on the wings. I'm not sure that there are two sections on the real airplane. It seems from the pictures I've seen just to be one part, but I would trust that Peter has actually done it correctly here and I'm just remembering it wrong. What we do not have though is there's no rudder control here. This is just a solid part. So there are limitations to the craziness in this Lego model. And we were already underneath, so let's continue underneath. Here we have full landing gear. So the landing gear in front closes in. Well done. And then we close the doors like this in order to get a more smooth surface underneath. The same can be done with the rear wheels. Closing in, although there's no doors, we do have parts of the bodywork here. Of course, we can also push the engine in like that, and it is relatively smooth underneath. So, a lot of parts making the construction of this airplane interesting. It was fun to build, I must say. A lot of details and parts that are constructed, but let me see if I can close this properly. But we also have to talk a bit about rare parts. I know I have these in dark grey in my collection. I just can't find them. I've looked everywhere. They should be dark grey. I'm sure you can brick build them so that it looks alright, but they are difficult for me to find. I don't know about you, but for me that was a challenge and I did not succeed. Another part that is even worse is this part here. We need two of them in new dark grey. They are placed here on the wings right here. But this part in new dark grey only came in one Lego set. Of course it's a Star Wars Lego set, limited edition. And if you want to buy one now on Bricklink, the cheapest is $60 US. But then you get 3 of these, which is great, right? I have used a 4x4 part instead. Let's look at it close up. And simply mounted it like that. So it is slightly smaller, you don't get as much of the 45-degree action, but I think this solution here is, did you really notice it before I pointed it out? Maybe if you're super good at remembering how this model is built, but I believe that this solution right here is perfectly fine. It is definitely much cheaper to build the wing like this rather than what you have using the building instructions. Let me just put the landing gear down again so you can also see how that works. It's just the reverse of what we already did. Whoops. Put it from the wheel like that. And there we go. The F-35B Lightning. There are a lot of tiny details that I just hinted to before. You have all the parts that are constituting the front, making sure that we have the curvature going into the intakes here on the sides. There's not too much going on in this region here, but that is paid back by all that you can see down here underneath. So here we have nice curvature again, parts that are folding and looking great. I don't think I should close that without the wheel being put into the body. And of course you have all the fun going on with the engine. One of the parts that should be in a different color is this 1x2 modified that is used for most of the moving action. This one right here, not this one, but the one mounted here, should be dark bluish gray. I do not have many of these, and I've used those that I have on the Mirage, but using them in light bluish gray instead of dark bluish gray is hardly noticeable, right? It doesn't really make much of a difference, and I'm sure that if you have, unless you have most of your parts from 2018, if you have an older collection, then it's much easier to use this part in light bluish gray. It does show, like right here, you have suddenly a light bluish gray spot, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference. If you really wanted it to be nice and smooth, then you would probably have built one of the other two versions of this airplane. And now, as promised, the bonus airplane, the B-2 bomber. That is the Northrup-Grumman B-2 Spirit. It is a stealth bomber from 1997, and it is in scale 1 to 115. What this means is that these two airplanes are almost in the same scale. But as you can see, the B-2 is just humongous compared to the other mini airplanes. This model here is very flat. I mean, the real airplane is also extremely flat, with just the engine sticking up a little bit, and of course the cockpit also being sticking up just a little bit from the main bodywork. And it is just one big flying wing, which also means that we have a couple of moving features, because the elephants, as they're called in this kind of airplane, are moving. So we can turn this part here and this part here in order to make sure that we can actually fly the airplane. The big party trick of this model, though, is that we have the 110 degree shape here, or the 110 degree angle from the front of the airplane, and on the back side we have this serrated angular build. It is definitely something that Peter had spent a lot of time making sure is correct, because you can see how the focus is when you're building this model. It's not very stable. You're building plates next to each other, setting some plates on top of them, but often not at a very stable technique of construction. However, the shape of the final airplane is, I mean, it's excellent. You can see how the wing parts here, the plates with an angle, are put together in order to work together like that, and it's beautiful. A really nice construction technique in order to build this airplane. Underneath there's not much going on, but here you can see how the center section is also moving down a bit. I of course have one part in old dark grey which is really sticking out, so I should replace it with some new dark greys instead. But that is pretty much it for the B-2 bomber. And that's it for this review, or this part of the review, because hopefully in not too long I should be able to finish one of the really big airplanes, so that we can get that in part 3 of the review. So see you then.